Good morning, everybody. My name's Oliver Picar. I'm the Vancouver chapter president for FEI Canada. I'm pleased to be here to introduce today's topic. Before we begin, I'd like to do a couple of things. First, you may have seen a recording button on your screen. If you accept, that will allow the screen to disappear and you'll see a link following the meeting, so you can come back to this. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our members for participating in today's event. Thank you all for coming and making the chapter a great one. Second, I'd like to just specifically thank Robert Half for being a gold level sponsor and being a great partner, not just for today's presentation, but over the past year, and contributing to the programming and ideation of topics that we bring to you. Today's topic is the next generation finance labor model, and we'll touch on highlights and factors driving changes in the attributes of successful CFOs and the staffing and management trends that are affecting us and our companies. To bring us some insight into that, we have Jason Flanders joining us from Robert Half. Jason is the Executive Director of Robert Half Management Resources, and in that capacity, he's responsible for overall strategy, operations, and business development worldwide for Robert Half Management Resources. So I'm sure he's going to provide us a tremendous amount of insight and experience. Jason, welcome, and I'd like to hand the presentation over to you at this point.
Great, thank you, Oliver. Really appreciate it, and it's wonderful to be with the chapter today. We certainly really enjoy the partnership with FEI and sponsor many events in North America, and we're very, very grateful for that. So good morning. Hope everyone's got a nice cup of coffee, and certainly hope everyone is staying safe and healthy as we continue to navigate the pandemic and hopefully return to the post-pandemic world and our quote-unquote new normal. So a couple logistical items. Would like to thank Bianca DeRose for joining us today as well. She's from our business communications and PR team at Robert Half, and she will be assisting with the presentation. And we are going to monitor the chat functionality for any questions that come in. We'd like to get to those through the presentation if you have some, so please, feel free to put any questions in the chat. We'll also try to leave a few minutes at the end of the presentation as well to go over anything that you may need further clarification on. So as Oliver mentioned, the changing CFO role is a big piece of the equation in today's environment. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the next gen finance labor model, which I would argue has really been accelerated through this pandemic. So we'll get into a whole host of details that we hope are very relevant to you in the business climate today for your teams and your management as well. So, think about it. It's really been a juggling act, and we have gone through so much, I would say, both professionally and personally. And as finance managers, you're having to juggle a lot currently. I guess the question is, are you ready to add more balls and torches and swords to the juggling act? Because it's really a fluid, agile situation we find ourselves in today. And certainly to remain on the cutting edge of your industry and as it relates to competition in the marketplace, we've got to be vigilant in terms of how we move the business forward. And so, you think about everything that we've gone through, from the coronavirus to social unrest, all the items that we've had to navigate as a community, really across the landscape. The only consistent is it's been a lot of change, and it's extremely fluid. You think about governments and different restrictions in different areas, and it's a situation where so many things have been altered, and business is changing in ways that we really have never experienced before. And, I would go on to say that the unknown really still persists for us in our business environments today. And you may be asking yourself, is a senior level finance leader or a CFO, what does that mean? What does that mean for the executive team? What does that mean in the boardroom, and certainly for the employees? And hopefully some of the material we cover today will provide some insight and help you navigate things as we remain in a very, very fluid situation, as I mentioned earlier. So let's talk about the CFO role a bit. And this slide here, you're going to notice there's a lot. So you think about today's CFO, and certainly this is not limited, but you've got a lot of items that you're responsible for. It could be cash flow, compliance related items, of course, forecasting and strategic initiatives, but you have staffs to manage, you have budgets to manage, you have to ensure your internal controls and processes are in order to move the business forward. And certainly that's a lot. And, in research that we've conducted in the past, we've learned that about 50% of your job is the same as perhaps it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago. But really the other half of what you do on a day-to-day basis has changed. And so I think that just illustrates the point that we are in such a dynamic environment today. And as a business leader, you've got to be very good at adapting, executing change management, and the like. So the next slide is going to highlight maybe some new items that have really evolved as we've moved through this pandemic. And again, to my earlier point, I believe the pandemic in many ways accelerated some of these changes and kind of forced us as leaders into a posture where we had to understand the importance of technology, understand the importance of interaction with the technology teams in our business and the CIO. Really, if you think about prior economic contractions, we had more time as business leaders. It was more of an evolution, if you will, to adapt the business to changing parameters in the economy. And in this situation, when we got into March, just over a year ago, we really all hit a cliff and things changed almost overnight. And we found ourselves in a virtual environment, transitioning employees to the home. And one consistent through all of that is technology. So you see some of these items here. I clearly won't go through all of them, but anything from cybersecurity to blockchain, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin would be your biggest players in and around the crypto piece. Think about the Internet of Things in general. I read an article about 2 weeks ago, and it was highlighting email exchanges, and 40 billion more emails were delivered in 2020 versus 2019, which is astounding. And it just goes to show the virtual environment is here to stay in many regards. But we're in an environment where technology is very helpful and it's necessary, but it can be very, very disruptive. And so you've got to think about AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, cloud services, very analytical based processes and procedures as it relates to technology, and understand the importance of embracing those, but keeping in mind they can be disruptive if you don't have a really solid game plan for your teams and your business going forward. So the big question is how to get a handle on the role, how to get a handle on all the changes during this era of digital disruption. And, I always like to say we're in a digital revolution here that was really sped up through the pandemic. But if you're like a typical CFO, your background is probably in accounting, business, or finance. You likely have an MBA or a CPA license. You might have both. You most likely have worked in an area outside of finance in the past, perhaps business development, sales, or PR. But you're mainly a financier and really not a technologist or a futurist. But we can't ignore the change, right? We can't just ignore the disruption that the technology might be causing. We've got to really dig in and remain resilient. And I think that's probably the key point that you'll hear as we step through. So I'm going to talk about 4 buckets in terms of navigating the role itself and all the changes that you might be facing. The first bucket is to get informed. And I think, information is power. I think speaking with all the stakeholders in certain processes, and not just stakeholders that are perhaps up the infrastructure in the executive team or the C-suite, but your team, the folks that work for you on the ground, valuable feedback, and then taking all of that information and putting it into a plan that you can execute. And so you've got to do all of it, but you have challenge. You've got to get informed about it. And you start really by that information. You almost have to get, another degree in terms of the communication piece, because we're all communicating very differently and more often today. I laugh with my teams. I get to see some of the teams more than I ever have because we can log into a Zoom call and be face to face. So I think that has been a little bit, if you can find one, a blessing in disguise for us to communicate and collaborate a little more, because if you travel, sometimes you have constraints there. But you don't have to be an expert in AI. You don't have to be an expert in RPA. You start by learning the basics of the disruptive technologies, and that can become part of your routine. So as we get into the session, you're going to want to think about this material, research some of the things that might be eye-opening for you, research trends in F&A. Certain conferences that you can attend are always very helpful. We have found, speaking to clients, that more so than ever, clients are reaching out for external content, for external collaboration, best practices, new research and tools that they can use to navigate their business, because there has been so much change. The second bucket is to benefit from reverse mentoring. And many of you may not have thought of this before. You might be in a current mentorship with someone on your team or someone from another department that a colleague has asked you to mentor. You obviously realize the benefits of helping, maybe some of the less experienced workers strive to achieve their professional goals. You're in a situation where you feel paying it forward really feels good, and it's great. And we've got to kind of embrace and help coach the next generation of leaders. And all that is great stuff, but the relationship can go both ways. And I've often thought about this in my own career, where I've perhaps been in a mentorship role, but I had the opportunity to seek a mentor as well. And there are so many benefits of reverse mentoring. You might be an aspiring CFO. And so you might have the opportunity from a mentorship capacity to reverse that course a bit and look for mentorship for yourself. But anything from talent management to problem solving and decision making, office politics, we hate to bring up, but it's certainly part of the world we exist in today. All of these things and understanding different angles as it relates to the business can help you. You've got to understand the millennial and Gen Z mindset, right? And so this is a big piece of business as you're hiring. And when we get into that next gen labor model, we'll talk about it a little more. So I would just say, as you begin your next mentoring ship, perhaps from a relationship perspective, just keep in mind areas where you can shore up as well, not just what you can offer your mentee. And this has been very helpful for me in my career, and certainly something we recommend as we continue to navigate, because you see different perspectives, and colleagues and mentors can often view things through a different lens, which can be very, very beneficial. And so we want to keep you all kind of engaged as we move throughout here. So we're going to move into our first polling question to kind of get you thinking a little bit. So Oliver, I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to read these out. So we'll do a few of these. Poll question. Compared to 3 years ago, if everyone could click on the appropriate radio button, how frequently are you collaborating with your company's chief information officer or IT manager? 5 choices. Much more, somewhat less, much less, and about the same.
And we'll give you just a few seconds here to submit your answers. And we'll let them load, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So somewhat more takes the lion's share here, just over half, and then about a third say much more, and about 14% or so are about the same. And I would say this is fairly consistent with what I see. This has been a polling question that we have used. I'm always interested to understand the collaboration between finance and IT, but it's more necessary now than ever, would be probably my biggest takeaway from all of the different changes we've seen economically and within businesses. Technology is just such a piece of the finance function. And so many clients tell us that they're evaluating systems, whether it be for implementation or upgrade scenarios, or perhaps moving certain technologies to a cloud-based platform. Again, all in the spirit of keeping things agile. And so certainly would advise that communication between the finance and the technology teams. I think it's really important. The third bucket is again related to that. So, the collaboration with the CFO, we went out and talked to, a bunch of Canadian CFO level leaders, and 74% said they collaborate more with their CFOs now than is compared to 3 years ago. And so, 3 out of 4 CFOs told us that. We've also seen certain infrastructures, depending on the size of your business, the complexity of your business, et cetera, where the technology suite may report into finance or vice versa. So you may have a CIO reporting into the CFO. And if you rewind 5, 10 years ago, I think the collaboration was minimal at best between the two groups. But certainly due to the changes we have experienced, that has accelerated, again, to my earlier comments. And I think it's a very, very much, it's an important piece of the business model moving forward. And so we've got a quote here from our executive VP of enterprise optimization here at Robert Half, who works very closely as it relates to a lot of our technology and our Protiviti consulting division, which I will reference throughout the presentation today. They are a wholly owned subsidiary of Robert Half, and many of you may be very familiar with Protiviti. World-class consulting firm specializing in audit, technology solutions, advisory, and risk. And basically what Tim says here is it's necessary. The adoption and implementation of new technologies, we talked about AI and RPA, they're no longer in their infancy. It's almost a critical business item at this point forward. And CFOs and CIOs need to work closely together to really consider the components moving forward for the business and how these two groups can cohabitate, if you will, to execute the business model. And I think it's very relevant. And then the fourth bucket is to tap outside resources. And this will kind of segue us, if you will, into the new labor model that we have really studied as an organization. And, if you think about all of the items we've discussed just to this point, the digital initiatives that we're experiencing, they're real, they are here, and they take money. It costs money. It's not a cheap scenario, but they're also costly in terms of time. And if you think about it, your company's current finance and IT teams don't have much time. I think bandwidth is limited. Many of us are operating in leaner staff environments as we continue to recover from the pandemic and revenues begin to increase. But it's not only that. You might feel certain specialized skill sets or niche-based needs are crucial when it comes to digital transformation, and that couldn't be more true. We see unemployment levels in and around this specialized space to really be under 3%, pretty much across the board. And so as very traditional as we study economic recoveries, the candidate market tightens, and it becomes harder to locate and bring on resources that fit your culture, that can execute your game plan. And that leads us into the second piece of the presentation, which we're going to focus in and around this next gen finance labor model, which I think you'll all find very interesting. We've certainly done a lot of research here. I've been in this business for a long period of time, and I have not seen change this rapid in a business climate before. But the good news is there are solutions out there that can help you scale, that can help you stay on time, on budget, and help you really, really move the business forward. And this next gen labor model is something that we've gone out to clients. We've asked them how they prefer to source for talent. Your company doesn't use a punch card mainframe computer, right? That requires their own mammoth size room. Your department keeps up with the latest hardware and software. You do all these things from a technical accounting standpoint, compliance requirements and best practices, but you've got to be up to date with the trends as well to understand what will help position you and keep you on the front edge. So what I'd like to do maybe before we dive deep into this new labor model is take a look at the traditional hiring practice. And I think, what this will do is help illustrate a little bit about kind of maybe where we've been and what our cadence has been as it relates to hiring and checking boxes to move the business forward. But if you think about it, the punch card equivalent of hiring is reactive, right? You need someone to do a certain job. So you go through a vetting process. You go through all the requirements that your company has set forth before you bring that employee on board. The older model is also binary, hire or outsource, such as basically an either or mindset, right? It's limiting. It's very, very limiting in terms of your ability to execute, and it poses challenges and can cause a cascading set of negative effects that can impact productivity down at the employee level, the desk level, if you will. The good news is this model has really transformed. And so you don't have to have an either or mindset at this point in time. You've got flexibility and scalable solutions that can help you achieve these goals. If you focus just on hiring full-time employees, that requires a lot of time. It can be very expensive, right? In startup heavy cities, specifically in regions where talent is at a premium. And again, we are probably moving into a situation where most markets are going to find talent is at a premium from a candidate shortage perspective. And then I would probably say lastly, additional certain skills are in short supply, and you might need those specific skills to meet a project initiative, right? You could be, by way of example, converting into an S/4HANA product for SAP in more of a cloud-based environment. And you've got to have a strong technical accountant with that aptitude from a systems perspective to help you move the ball down the field. And that's not just easy to go find. And so the new labor model is based on a flexible and scalable mix of talent. That's really what we're talking about here. You've got your full-time employees, your core staff, if you will. You've got interim-based workers that might be able to come in and add value, clearly. You've got consultant-level professionals or other external experts, subject matter experts might be the best term there. And then you've got a managed service product or offering that is available in the new labor world that we sit in today. And you may ask yourself, well, what is managed services? And to state it very simply, it's an agile, custom-based solution that blends these mixes of talent together to help you execute a project. So it blends full-time employees and consulting solutions with staffing options for you to execute on your critical business needs. And that's where we are today. That's the environment that many clients find themselves in as they navigate certain challenges. They've got to have flexibility to scale up and down with the workload to make sure, again, they're on time, under budget, and the productivity at the desk level for their full-time employees is not being hurt. So this slide helps illustrate a little bit with a graphic here about how the pieces fit in together, okay? So think about it like this. Managed services often starts with consultants. These are your SMEs, your subject matter experts. They have expertise in disruptive technologies, business process, analytics. A lot of this is data driven, as we know. risk and compliance, cybersecurity, some of those hot buttons we saw on the second or third slide around the CFO role today. You've got to set the strategy, right? So the work can be accomplished in collaboration with your in-house teams, or the consultants can head up the entire project. That depends on you as a business leader, right? That depends on where you are in the process, what bandwidth you have to dedicate in-house teams, or if you feel like pulling them too far away from day-to-day operational work is going to be unproductive. So you've got to evaluate that. The specialized staff then execute the plan underneath the direction of a project manager. Very, very simple. But what it does is it allows you to keep control as the ultimate decision maker, but you have a project manager move the business, manage the talent to perform the deliverable-based work that you need accomplished. And then even after the project's delivered, the managed services approach or team can handle the reporting, they can handle the additional responsibility and support, and clearly provide milestone updates, progress updates throughout the duration of the initiative. And all of this is done in a smooth, coordinated fashion. And so we continue to get feedback from a whole host of organizations that this type of flexibility and scalability helps them really stay on task. So you think about your company, and many of these might be enterprise level initiatives, right? It might just not impact a certain group or function or finance. Depending on the size of your organization, it could be impacting the IT group, the legal department, the creative team. And because the enterprise level initiatives go so far beyond a particular work stream, if you will, the managed services project and that type of model where you have oversight and you have staffing resources that come in through a variety of skill sets can handle any of the cross-functional needs related to the enterprise. And that is what we provide at Robert Half and Protiviti. The staffing piece from Robert Half and the consulting piece from Protiviti combine to provide the managed service. And there are many options. Clearly, we're here to provide information to help you make better decisions in your business as you move forward. And in talking to some of the largest employers out there today, this is their preference in the current environment, more so often than looking to hire a full-time headcount where it's more of a fixed cost on your balance sheet. So enterprise level initiatives, singular work streams, very strategic initiatives within your organization. This managed service solution approach really does provide you with the ability to stay agile within your business environment and stay in control, which is very, very important. So with that, let's keep you engaged and move into our second polling question that Oliver will read for us.
Thanks, Jason. So this one's pretty straightforward for me to read out. Do you rely on external support for major one-time initiatives? Yes or no?
Yes, very straightforward on that one, Oliver. Thank you very much. So we'll give you a moment here. Yeah, no surprise. No surprise at all. The majority of the folks, really almost 9 out of 10, rely on external resources because it's just important to keep the productivity going within your teams. And again, you have these ancillary items within critical initiatives or projects that you need subject matter expertise on. And oftentimes going out to an external resource, you can pinpoint and custom recruit or identify that specific skill set through the resource and through your external partner to help you bring someone in who should be able to shorten the learning curve, plug and play to some extent, get right into the business to add value so that you as a business leader can stay confident in where your business is going and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So really no surprise there. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the survey work that we've done. And you'll see this slide here. This is more than 300 CFOs at Canadian-based companies that we went out and asked, right? How do you typically staff major one-time initiatives and follow up to the polling question? Could be an acquisition, could be an implementation, a systems initiative, as we mentioned earlier. Could be a large streamlining effort related to payables. You could be bringing certain business functions back on shore. You may have a shared service center environment. So many one-time initiatives that we certainly face as business leaders. But you can see most CFOs already see the benefit, right? But the majority, if you focus in on the blended piece of the sphere graph, 52%, over half of the CFOs we've talked to rely on a blended solution, okay? That is where you've got your in-house employees and external resources coming together to accomplish a certain task or project. And that inner portion of that sphere infographic there or illustration will continue to broaden. We feel like through the rest of this year and even on a go-forward basis in these new environments we're in, that digital revolution I spoke to has forced us into a posture of finding solutions to remain flexible for the business. And so you've got that blend there between core staff and external resources to come together to really execute. Okay. So another poll question here. Let's shift to priorities. And I personally study risk a good bit. Protiviti, as I mentioned earlier, publishes certain risk reports as it relates to the current economic environment. What you see as business leaders is your top risks. We've also gone out a decade from now, which you may find interesting. It's very simple. You would Google Protiviti risk survey and tried to forecast through research and feedback from senior level leaders how they think the risks will evolve over the next decade. And it's really interesting to kind of read that material. But take a moment here. We'll turn it over to Oliver for this piece for you to think about a little bit.
Yeah, so everyone, please, what is your top priority for 2021? Security and privacy data, enhanced data analytics, financial planning and analysis, changing demands and expectations of your external customers, or leadership within your organization?
Thank you, Oliver. All important, right? To some extent. Again, will depend on your environment within your business. Interesting. Okay, so FP&A leads the way here, followed in second by the enhanced data analytics piece, and then leadership within your organization. Security and privacy down near the bottom there, along with changing demands and expectations of internal customers. So, to me, the financial planning and analysis piece as you move your business forward relates a lot to how your revenues recover and how you can allocate funding and internal resources to specific items. And I think that's very much in alignment with what we see in here. I'm a little surprised security and privacy is not a little higher, but we do find larger organizations, large cap, if you will, 500 million or more in revenue are really focused in on this piece right now. So of course, it depends on your business environment and the size of your organization, but FP&A is big. And the interesting thing about FP&A, over the past 5 years, and especially over the last 3, FP&A has become more analytics driven. It's more data science based. And so no surprise to see the analytics piece follow right in behind that. Okay, that's great. Thank you all for submitting your feedback there. So priorities, let's dive a little deeper. And just to keep this really simple here, you've got a couple of different colors on the bar graphs. 2020, so pandemic year, 2020 is in orange. And the teal color, if you will, is 2019. And again, this is the survey that I mentioned earlier. This is Protiviti's Global Finance Trends Survey. We've published 2. One is around trends in the COVID area, and one is related to top risks. So they're both great benchmarking tools for you as business leaders to just download. It's easily searchable and read through some of the information that might be more critical to you. But you see there, the security and data privacy piece was up near the top. And so that's why I made my earlier comment. That was a little lower on your priority list. And again, I think that relates to your current business environment. So one size certainly doesn't fit all, but one common theme is the analytics piece, the data, right? And that is right there at number 2 and has really moved up this survey over the last few years. We've been doing this for a little while now. And then you can read through there. FP&A is right there in the top 4. We've talked about some of the systems initiative and cloud-based opportunities. Internal controls and compliance, I kind of put those two together. Typically, I think that continues to be a critical need for our businesses. I mean, really, if you think going back, to the early 2000s, and we saw the revolution of Sarbanes-Oxley in the U.S. and some of these things, I think that caught a real wave throughout the globe, if you will, in terms of regulatory regulations and compliance items that were going to be critical to move your business forward. So I always find this information very helpful. And again, in the report, you can drill down on any of these buckets, if you will, and source for more information and get as deep as you want to into certain items that relate to your business. We've got another quote in here. Change can be messy and disruptive if transformative technologies are inadequately resourced. And so, listen, we've got to be experts at change management today, really more than I've seen in a long period of time, just because of all the fluid, dynamic scenarios we face in the business. And as I mentioned, technologies are wonderful. They're critical for the business. They help us automate processes. They help us remove manual redundancy, to free up your teams to be more productive, but they can be very disruptive to the business. And it's just critical that you've got that mindset. So future proofing. So now we're going to get into the reasons you attended the session, really, and hopefully, is how to future proof your company and your workforce. So you've got the information. How do you insulate your business, insulate your team, or reduce the impact of external items that may not be within our control, to future-proof your business for a really strong future as we continue to recover. And we're going to talk about a few buckets here. And you're going to notice, again, the theme really diving into some of the digital pieces that can help you build a future-proof company. But you've simply got to look at automating certain functions. Is it a technology or a system you want to embrace across your division? Maybe not. But you certainly have to look at it for specific systems. There's barriers, a lot of barriers, quite frankly, to business process automation. You've got lack of time, you've got lack of money, maybe insufficient skills on your team to help execute some of those automation initiatives, like I mentioned earlier. But resistance from your staff and possibly the CEO as well, you could face. You've got to make these proposals in the boardroom or in the C-suite for what's best for your department or your work stream. But if you balance that with the upside really is immense. And you think about the increased productivity that can be accomplished. You think about the ability to produce better solutions for your business in a quicker and more efficient fashion. And then I mentioned this, but freeing up the time of your staff. Imagine a world where you've got processes really streamlined and functioning well, and your staff can now be challenged to focus on innovation, new strategy, new business development opportunities, perhaps, or any other value-added based work that we as humans do so well if we have that opportunity. So if you think about it, think about your number of days spent on a financial report, okay? Our company, along with Financial Education and the Research Foundation, we went out, we conducted a study on benchmarking, and this is around benchmarking the accounting and finance function, which we produce on the Robert Half side. Again, easily searchable. We can provide any information you want. We're here to empower you to help you make decisions based on information and research. So our benchmarking the accounting and finance function really focuses during the pandemic year last year. We focus on looking at these different functionalities and how they impact businesses. And we were surprised, quite frankly, by how many days both the US and Canadian-based companies have shaved off the time they spend on financial reporting. And I think you may find it interesting as well. So take a look at this next bar graph. So this is leading into the pandemic, okay? So 2018, 2019, it'll be really interested to dive deeper through the pandemic data that we're able to collect. We're not out of the pandemic yet. But in 18, US companies spent on average 31 days on financial reporting, okay? Canadian-based companies spent 42. Just a year later, the US shaved off 7, but Canada shaved off a tremendous amount, 22 days, which is tremendous. So this illustrates a little bit about the Canadian philosophy of embracing some of these technology enhancements, looking for ways to streamline and improve efficiencies through automation, et cetera, and look at the productivity that they have freed up and the amount of time it now takes versus 2018. I imagine that will continue to go down. Another likely reason is the dwindling percentage of companies that are still doing manual reconciliation work, okay? Or basically not using their tool or system at all. So from 55% and 58%, as you see there in the US and Canada in 2018, down to 48 and 40 the following year. Again, Canada making tremendous progress around this. Again, this is sourced from our benchmarking report that's easily findable for you all if you'd like to dig a little further into the data. But it just goes to show these processes are improving. And I think, again, I reinforce the pandemic has accelerated a lot of our thought process and mindset around this. So think about Excel for budgeting and planning purposes, okay? So this is the go-to workhorse in the finance department, right? You're seeing year-over-year declines in popularity as a tool for budgeting and planning. So think FP&A, if you will. Coming to the forefront are the ERP-based platforms and cloud-based solutions. So you can see the decline in usage, both in the US and Canada. Canada was using it quite a bit in 2017, again, based on the research we conducted. And you just look at the decline there on the bar graph, and that illustrates more digital transformative based initiatives and products to drive efficiency, okay? So to me, it's kind of clear, while the pace of change is varying depending on different organizations, there's clearly an overall shift towards using more types of technologies in more areas to modernize your business. Again, all very positive things, but can be very disruptive. So we're going to stay on future proofing, okay? The second bucket, we just went through automation. The second bucket is around succession planning. And I would just, based on my conversations and the presentations and speaking engagements that I do regularly, this is something that's not paid attention to very much, or as much as you may think. And we continue to get that type of feedback, but this is the second way to really future-proof your organization for change. Selecting and grooming those who's going to take over your role. So if you were to move into another role, is your group, is your team set up for success? Is there an individual identified who can step in to fill your shoes, keep the business moving forward? And guess what the number one reason is that leaders don't really think about succession planning? Probably no surprise. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving. I'm very comfortable where I am. It's the number one reason that we hear from finance execs. And many CFOs don't have a succession plan. It's an item we encourage to get focused on, especially concerning smaller businesses. So think businesses with fewer than 50 employees. 69% of those respondents told us they do not have an heir apparent if they were to leave. And that can really disrupt the business. It's another risk area. The role of the CFO has become so influential within the organization that the risks of not having a succession plan are a lot more significant now if a CFO departs 5 or 10 years ago. And I think that speaks largely to everything we've spoken to this point. It is something you've definitely got to think of. And the third bucket is reskilling and upskilling employees. This is really, really big in the marketplace right now. You've got to invest in your people. Think reskilling is training your employees as job functions disappear and new ones appear, right? So I mentioned earlier, 50% of the CFO role might be a little bit of the same around the balance sheet as it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. But the other 50% is different today. So certain job functions go away, new job functions appear. It's arguably a horizontal move. So, maybe by way of example, if you're one of the many companies that's moving away from manual reconciliation work, you need to help those bookkeepers and accountants learn how to use the new software. Or as you move towards a robotics process, the staff who used to carry out those tasks should be reskilled in another function, such as how to use AI for better decision-making or client advisory. Very, very important. And then if you think upskilling, very simple, it's a vertical move, building on what people already know and do and helping them do it better and faster. It's a great way to get the future workforce you need, but it's a great way to incentivize and motivate internal employees, giving them opportunities, providing resources for them to improve their skill sets. It could be an external class that you offer them to take or a certain training session, but all very important as we look towards the new labor model. So the CFO role is changing, right? The labor model is in a new position as we move forward. It's a much more flexible and agile model where you take blended solutions like staffing and consulting and you put them together to achieve a common goal. So the labor model is changing as well, right? I mean, we know it. It's here to stay. The question is going to be, will you and your organization keep up with the change? Are you positioned to keep up with the change? So we've covered a lot of ground. We're winding down the presentation now with a few more comments. So let's pause for a moment. Oliver, anything in the chat or anything that the group would like to submit now via questions? We'd love to have an open discussion.
Yeah, so I'll remind everyone can add something to the chat. So put your questions in. I have a couple here, Jason, already. Can you talk about what skill sets really have evolved over the last year? There seemed to be a lot of acceleration in some of your charts, 2019 to 2020, especially in Canada. And what skills are companies looking for today? Have you seen a marked change in that recently?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so it's interesting. The technical based skill sets are always going to be of importance to specific organizations and you as a hiring manager. So when I say that, I mean your traditional accounting work, your reporting work, your compliance work, having that aptitude to execute on the close process, if you will. Where we've seen the change is organizations are telling us it's not just enough to perhaps have the technical piece. You've got to have the systems experience as well. You've got to have the ability to think strategically within these roles. We still see the top 3 job functions, which may be helpful for you all at the senior accountant level, if you will, at the analyst level, as well as the accounting manager and controllership level. And those are very strategic based roles. Oftentimes, clearly you're leading and managing teams in those specific roles as well. But the cultural fit now is really, really important to clients as well. So I think the second part to answer your question, not just the additional need for systems and cross-functional experience, whether it's different industries or systems, and not just the technical accounting piece, but it's the cultural fit. It's the ability to be a really cohesive piece of the team. So those are the soft skills that you don't see on paper, right? Which provides a new challenge in today's climate, because we're used to bringing those individuals in and meeting and spending time together with the team, in the workplace. And perhaps now you're in a situation where you're having to do that virtually as you onboard. So it's critical to take the time there to vet appropriately for a potential candidate on the soft skills, because it's important right now to drive culture and to drive teamwork and to build that culture, but it's harder to do so in a virtual world. So two pieces to the answer there. You've got systems need, not just technical accounting, and the culture fit.
Yeah, and so can you expand a little bit then on what's changed, for executive hiring and onboarding? That must look a lot different right
Yeah.
now than it has before.
It really is completely different, Oliver, and we're all facing challenges there. We're facing it as an organization across the globe. But what we have found is a couple of recommendations. You can't virtually interview 15 people. Okay, you're too busy, right? So you may have your profile review process where you're looking for certain items that fit, the key priorities you're searching for within your team. You want to try to kind of funnel that down to your top candidates that you see and then move into the virtual interview process. Okay. And you've got to look for eye contact. You've got to look for body language. You've got to look for professional attire. All of these things that we used to not think about as much in the workplace are critical now, because the way in which you present yourself in the virtual world is important. And it does speak to you as a professional in the workplace. But it is different and it is challenging. And oftentimes identifying everything you need for your team, you might not be able to accomplish in the virtual interview. So you've got to prioritize. You may not be able to check all 10 boxes, but you've got to prioritize what the critical items are in terms of what you're trying to achieve with the new hire. And lean on external resources as well. Do the research, find the information, partner with a firm to help you through that process if you feel you need that additional support. But Oliver, it is night and day from what it was. And I think in many ways, as we move into the new normal, we're going to be in a hybrid environment to some extent, meaning certain employees will be in the office, certain won't. There could be a mix there in terms of what employee preference is. And we as employers need to listen to the employers in terms of that also.
Yeah, okay, that's great insight. I think that prioritization is really key for me. Yeah. I think maybe we have time for one last question, and maybe we want to think a little bit about the workers we already have in seat. So how would you, or how should we think about, meeting or managing workers' expectations during these kind of unpredictable times? Because we seem to move forward and backwards sometimes both ways on the same day.
Yeah, it's almost like we're running from one side of the boat to the other and then back and back again based on what our initiatives are for the day or for the week or what we need to adjust to from a business climate standpoint. And it's very challenging. Think about how tired you've been as business leaders navigating your teams through this. Well, imagine your teams as well. Obviously, very, very stressful. My first piece of advice, and the most important piece, is transparency. You can't let your employees in on everything that you're doing as an organization. Clearly, some information is sensitive, but we encourage you to bring them in early and often on change management initiatives or strategic items that you're looking to implement or embrace in the future of the business. I think A, you'll find you'll get great feedback from your team, but B, they're going to feel like they're invested in the company and in the decision-making process. They're being validated, they're being heard. That will drive motivation, it'll drive productivity, but it's very important as well to remain empathetic. And we have really stressed this over the last 12, 13 months. Clients tell us we've got to remain very empathetic to employees and their situations, right? You've got so many items that individual workers are dealing with right now. It could be childcare. It could be their home office and work environment. We run into bandwidth and internet issues all the time. during meetings. It's so many things that can provide speed bumps throughout your day. We've got to stay positive with our teams, and we've got to probably do a little more cheering now that we have done in the past, meaning celebrate every success. Try to highlight even the smallest successes as we move forward, because it's going to drive engagement. Your teams are going to be happier. And then you've got to provide those opportunities I mentioned to help give them new opportunities to learn and grow. It could be a training course. It could be, we want you to get additional training around this item as we move the business forward. Employees like challenge, and they like to see that you're investing in them and want to help broaden their skill set.
Great, thanks so much. I think we've got, we're about at time here, so I'd like to wrap up a little bit, but before you might say some final words, I want to just make sure I thank you. I mean, this whole presentation, times maybe I was uncomfortable, or you were almost speaking directly to me and all the challenges I have personally, but it was excellent. I'd also like to make sure that I thank kind of some of the invisible hands that supported us. So Bianca on your team, she's been managing the PowerPoint presentation, and we have several volunteers on the events committee in the local chapter too that help bring this together. So this was really excellent, Jason. Thank you so much. And any final words from you?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity. We love the partnership with FEI. I get to spend a great deal of time with FEI chapters across North America and on the national level. And you're such outstanding business leaders. I'd like to personally thank Stephanie Ferguson. You were tremendous in helping us get all of this set up. So thank you very much. And Oliver, I'm with you. Oftentimes I feel like I'm speaking to myself in some of these as well. But I think we've got to be very honest in our assessments as we move forward. And that can only help us as business leaders. So thank you all very much again for the opportunity. We really hope the information was helpful. And I wish everybody a great rest of the week.
Yeah, tremendous. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Robert Half.